All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are going deep on one of the most well-known, and let's face it, controversial, names in tech.
You're talking about Elon Musk, right?
Yeah, Elon Musk. And we've got a ton of great stuff to dig into. We've got excerpts from Ashley Vance's biography.
Oh, and it's translated into Indonesian.
Yeah, Indonesian. We've also got this really cool timeline of like all the major events in his life.
Don't forget the list of all the important people in Musk's world.
Right. And there are even some FAQs about him and the companies he's built.
Wow, it's impressive, really. With all this, we can get a much deeper understanding of Musk.
Exactly. Not just as like a CEO or engineer, but like, where did he even come from?
Yeah.
What made him who he is today?
Like, what were the big influences in his life?
Yeah. And then there's the whole how does he do it question.
You mean like, how does he have so many wins?
Well, the wins and the, let's be honest, some pretty massive failures too.
Oh yeah, almost like movie-level failure sometimes.
Right. So we'll look at all that. And ultimately, we want to try and understand what drives the guy. What are his goals, fears, and what's with this whole vision for the future he keeps talking about.
It is fascinating, isn't it? It's not just about understanding one man. It's about understanding this new way of approaching problems, this new way of innovating.
Like a blueprint for how to shake things up, right?
Exactly.
Okay, let's start at the beginning, his childhood.
Yeah.
The biography really paints this picture of young Elon, and the way he learned was just different. He wasn't just reading books, he was like absorbing every bit of knowledge he could get his hands on.
Like he had this insatiable hunger for knowledge.
It was almost like he had to know the why behind everything, not just the how.
That's true. He was reading science fiction and also hardcore technical stuff.
It seems like he was driven to just figure out how the world works on a fundamental level.
And that approach, this first principles thinking, is something that's defined his whole career.
Interesting. And do you think some of this intense curiosity came from his family background? His grandfather was a pretty adventurous guy.
Joshua Haldeman.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. The guy was a real adventurer, flying his own plane all over the place.
Exploring uncharted territory. That adventurous spirit had to have some influence on Elon.
I think so, too. And it wasn't just his grandfather. The whole family was, a bit eccentric.
Yeah.
Strong personalities, lots of complicated family dynamics.
That probably explains his own risk-taking nature and why he always seems to be pushing against the norms.
It makes sense.
So let's talk about the start of his career as an entrepreneur. Because, Musk didn't just become a billionaire overnight. His first company, Zip2, it was pure .com hustle.
Right, back when the internet was still kind of new.
Yeah, and him and his brother, Kimball, they were basically living in this tiny office space,
Wow.
cold calling businesses, working all hours of the day and night. Not exactly the glamorous tech CEO image.
No, not at all. But it was the foundation for everything he'd achieve later.
And it's interesting, they weren't just selling a product, they were selling a vision of the future.
Oh, totally. They were trying to bring businesses online, create those early online directories.
Yeah, they were ahead of the curve, trying to shape the way the world was going to work and live online.
And they did it by spotting these emerging technologies and building solutions that would change how people do things.
And then comes PayPal. Well, it wasn't always PayPal, right?
It started out as X.com.
Right, X.com. This online banking platform competing with another really ambitious startup, Confinity. And then they merge. And that's when things really took off.
Oh yeah, the PayPal story is a classic Silicon Valley story. Disruption, moving fast, and honestly, a bit of luck.
Musk merging those two companies was a brilliant move.
Yeah, he saw the potential in combining their strengths, and that's how they came to dominate the world of online payments. This was also where we saw the birth of the PayPal Mafia.
Ah, yes, the infamous PayPal Mafia.
All those amazing people who would go on to become huge figures in Silicon Valley, Peter Thiel, Max Levchin, Reid Hoffman, so many talented people.
It's crazy how many big names came out of PayPal.
I know, right? It's like a who's who of the tech world.
But there's a plot twist. Musk actually got pushed out as CEO after a power struggle. That had to be a tough pill to swallow.
It does make you wonder, though, right? Like, does his personality, his intense need to be in control, does that sometimes work against him?
Yeah, it seems like a recurring theme throughout his career. Massive success, then dramatic conflicts, almost Shakespearean.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So picture this. Musk sells PayPal. He's sitting on a pile of cash. What does he do? He decides to build rockets. Rockets. Like, the guy sets his sights on colonizing Mars.
It almost sounds like a midlife crisis, but on a massive scale.
Right. Was this just a whim, or was there something deeper going on?
I think this is where we really see Musk's vision take center stage. Space travel wasn't just a random idea. It was this deep-seated belief he had that to survive, humans need to become a multiplanetary species.
He was thinking way, way ahead.
And SpaceX wasn't just about, like, making space travel cheaper or more accessible. It was about making life on Mars a reality.
That's a pretty big goal.
For sure. But the way he approached the problem was fascinating. He didn't just say, let's go to Mars. He broke it down step by step.
Like a giant engineering puzzle.
Exactly. Reduce the cost of space travel. Figure out reusable rockets. Build a reliable way to get supplies to Mars. One step at a time.
And I love the story from the book about him going to Russia, like actually trying to buy those refurbished ICBMs. Can you imagine that? He just sold a tech company, and now he's haggling with former Soviet rocket scientists.
It shows how scrappy and hands-on he was in the early days of SpaceX. Taking big risks, working with very little money, and getting deep into the technical details himself.
And of course, we know those first few SpaceX launches. They weren't exactly picture perfect, were they?
No, not at all. Failure after failure. But he never gave up.
It's remarkable, that resilience, that almost crazy belief that he could do what everyone thought was impossible. That's a huge part of who he is.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's switch gears for a minute. Let's talk about Tesla. Electric cars, they weren't exactly a new thing when he started Tesla, right?
They had been around for a while.
But Musk saw electric cars as part of this much bigger picture, this future powered by sustainable energy. And he wanted to build an electric car that wasn't just good for the environment. He wanted it to be high performance, stylish, even a status symbol.
Yeah, he wasn't messing around. He wanted to change people's perceptions of what an electric car could be.
And he was taking on the entire auto industry, which was dominated by gasoline-powered cars.
It was another example of his disruptive approach. He didn't just want to make electric cars a little bit better. He wanted to redefine the whole industry.
So how did he do it? How did he convince people to even consider electric cars?
Well, he started with the Tesla Roadster. It was basically a Lotus Elise that they converted to electric. It was expensive, the range wasn't great, but it was fast. Really fast.
That speed was a game changer. People started to see that electric cars could be cool and high performance.
Yeah, that Roadster was a statement. It was a challenge to the rest of the car industry to keep up.
But building a car company from the ground up, that's got to be incredibly difficult. And the sources mention all these challenges he faced. Raising money, production delays, technical problems. They were constantly fighting for survival.
It was a make-or-break situation for Tesla, multiple times. And the company probably wouldn't have survived without Musk's personal investment, his relentless drive, and his ability to inspire people, both investors and employees, to buy into his vision.
It's mind-boggling to think about all this happening at the same time. SpaceX is launching rockets, Tesla's building electric cars. It must have been absolute chaos.
The sources describe the work environment at both companies as incredibly intense, demanding, almost chaotic at times. Long hours were expected, communication was very direct, and there was a lot of pressure to meet his incredibly high expectations.
There's this almost legendary story about him interviewing someone and asking, if you had to work 100 hours a week, could you do it? That's not your typical job interview question.
It's insane.
It makes you wonder if that kind of pressure is even sustainable.
Yeah. Is it possible to keep attracting and retaining top talent while also pushing them to their absolute limits? It's a big question.
You know, it's so interesting. You read about people complaining about the pressure, the long hours, the lack of work-life balance. But then you also hear from people who thrived in that environment, people who were drawn to his ambition and commitment. It's like two sides of the same coin.
It is. You have these people who feel burnt out and exhausted, and then you have others who are inspired and energized by the same things. It's a fascinating paradox, and that brings us to the core of who Elon Musk is. This incredible visionary, a force of nature who's constantly innovating, but also someone who's incredibly flawed and controversial. He's accomplished these amazing things, but it makes you wonder, at what cost?
Yeah, it's a good point. We've covered a lot of ground: childhood, early companies, SpaceX, Tesla, but we're just getting started. Stay tuned, because when we come back, we're going to dive deeper into Musk's ambitions, those quirks that make him so unique, and of course, those criticisms that have followed him throughout his career.
It's crazy to think about the cost of that level of ambition and drive.
Yeah.
And speaking of ambition, let's talk about what might be Musk's biggest goal yet.
Colonizing Mars. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but he's dead serious about it.
It does seem pretty far out there, right? But what's really interesting is how he tackles a problem that big. He doesn't just say, okay, let's go to Mars. He breaks it down. Into smaller, manageable steps, right?
Exactly. Like, step 1, reduce the cost of getting to space. Step 2, reusable rockets. Step 3, figure out how to get all the supplies you need to Mars.
And each of those steps is a huge challenge in itself.
Totally. But he takes this giant, overwhelming problem and turns it into a series of solvable engineering puzzles.
Like that whole thing with the Falcon 9 landing vertically, that was more than just a cool spectacle. It was a huge step towards making space travel way more efficient and affordable.
He was a total game changer. Suddenly, space wasn't just for governments and billionaires anymore. But Mars, even with reusable rockets, it's still so far away. What are the practical challenges of actually building a colony on another planet?
I mean, where do we even begin?
Yeah.
Creating a livable environment, dealing with radiation, extreme temperatures, and there's no air to breathe on Mars.
Yeah, you need to create a whole artificial atmosphere.
It's a Herculean task, to say the least. And that's before we even start talking about the psychological impact.
Yeah.
How do people handle living in such an isolated, harsh environment? What are the long-term effects of that?
Those are really good questions. I read in the FAQs that Musk wants to send a greenhouse to Mars, like a self-contained biodome to try growing food in Martian soil. Is that even possible?
As crazy as it sounds, yeah, it's a real thing. Still in very early stages, but it's a crucial step towards a permanent colony.
Imagine the complexity of that, though. Building something that can survive the Martian environment, sending it millions of miles through space, and then actually successfully growing food in alien soil.
It's almost unimaginable. It's
Yep.
awe-inspiring and kind of terrifying at the same time.
Totally. So let's say we manage to figure out all the practical stuff, the technology, the engineering. What about the human element? Can people really live on Mars long term?
That's the big unknown, isn't it? It would require such a huge psychological and social adjustment. I mean, imagine leaving behind everything you know, your family, your friends, your whole culture, to be a pioneer on this barren, unforgiving planet. It would be incredibly difficult.
It's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but Musk seems totally convinced it can be done. Where does that confidence come from? Is it just sheer stubbornness, an absolute refusal to give up on his vision?
There's definitely an element of that, but it's also his ability to inspire other people, to get them to believe in his vision, even when it sounds impossible.
Yeah, he attracts some of the brightest minds in the world, people who want to push the limits of what's possible, people who aren't afraid to take risks.
And they all share this passion for moving humanity forward. Think about the PayPal mafia. That's proof of his ability to attract top talent.
Yeah, that's true. But we also have to acknowledge the other side of the coin. He's notorious for being incredibly demanding, almost ruthless at times.
Right. There are stories about people working insane hours, the pressure, the burnout.
The excerpts from the biography talk about people complaining about the work culture being toxic.
And the demands he places on his employees.
Yeah.
It's not always a pretty picture.
It's interesting because you have these incredible achievements, but also this dark side. The long hours, the pressure cooker environment. It's a bit unsettling.
There's a story about him sleeping under his desk at the Tesla factory, working 120-hour weeks, sending emails at 3 a.m. It's like he doesn't sleep.
It does seem like he's constantly pushing himself and everyone around him to the breaking point.
It makes you question the sustainability of it all. Can he maintain this pace? What about the impact on the people around him, his employees, his family, himself?
It's a lot to process, but there's this energy about him, this contagious passion that makes you believe that anything is possible. He seems to think we really can solve these huge problems facing humanity.
I get that. He's so optimistic, so determined. It's infectious.
But he's also a walking contradiction, right? This visionary leader, demanding boss, eccentric genius, flawed human being. How do you even begin to reconcile all those different parts of his personality?
It's the Musk paradox. He's undeniably flawed, but he also pushes boundaries, dreams big, takes risks, and inspires others to do the same. He embodies both the promise and the potential dangers of pushing innovation to its limits.
It's like he lives in a world where the word impossible doesn't even exist.
And that's exactly what makes him so fascinating and so polarizing. People either love him or hate him, but they can't ignore him. He forces us to confront these really big questions about the future, the sacrifices we're willing to make, and what it means to be human in this age of rapid technological change.
We've talked about his achievements, his failures, his vision for the future. But what about Elon Musk? The person, the man behind the myth. The sources paint him as pretty eccentric, even a little erratic at times.
Oh, yeah. Remember that whole thing with the Twitter poll about selling Tesla stock? That was pretty wild.
It was bizarre.
His behavior, both online and offline, is often described as unpredictable, impulsive, sometimes even self-destructive.
He really seems to enjoy pushing buttons, challenging social norms. He's always making these pronouncements that get him into trouble.
He's like a real-life Tony Stark, the billionaire genius who loves to push the envelope but sometimes takes it too far.
The comparison is perfect. Like Stark, Musk is complex and contradictory. Brilliant engineer, driven innovator, but prone to these impulsive decisions and reckless behavior. He's full of surprises.
He is. There's this story in the book about him throwing this lavish party with Neil Diamond performing right in the middle of the dot-com crash. While everyone else was panicking, he was throwing a party.
He's definitely not afraid to do his own thing. He doesn't play by the rules.
Exactly. He defies expectations. He operates outside the norms of traditional business.
But it's not all fun and games. The biography also touches on his struggles with OCD and how demanding he can be with his employees. That need for control can't be easy to manage.
It must be incredibly difficult. That drive for perfection, the need for control, the micromanaging. It definitely takes a toll on him and his relationships.
Yeah, and then there's his relationship with his first wife, Justine. It sounds like a real tragedy, lots of passion, lots of conflict, and ultimately it fell apart.
Their marriage was definitely turbulent. The sources suggest that his intense work schedule, his emotional detachment, and his unwillingness to compromise played a big role in their separation.
It's sad. It seems like he can get so focused on achieving his goals, building his vision of the future, that he neglects the people closest to him.
It's a common struggle for people who are that driven. The pursuit of greatness often comes with a personal cost, and Elon Musk is a prime example of that.
So where does that leave us? Visionary leader, demanding boss, eccentric genius, flawed human being. It's hard to make sense of it all.
Exactly. That's the challenge and the fascination of trying to understand someone like Elon Musk. He defies easy categorization. He constantly makes us question our assumptions and reevaluate our own beliefs about what's possible.
And we've only just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to explore about his companies, his impact on the world, and the ethical implications of his ambitions. We'll dive into all that and more in the final part of our deep dive into the world of Elon Musk. Stick with us.
Welcome back. Trying to understand Elon Musk is like trying to hold on to water. He's constantly changing and evolving. But for this last part, I really want to zero in on something we keep coming back to. The intense work culture at his companies, especially SpaceX and Tesla. It's like beyond demanding, right?
It is. The amount of dedication needed to work at a Musk company, it's intense. It really becomes your whole life. We're talking about people working all the time, day and night, weekends, holidays. There's not much separation between work and personal life.
And it's all to achieve those, frankly, insane goals he sets. I remember this quote from the book. Musk says to the Tesla team, "We're either going to make history or die trying." Even in Silicon Valley, that's pretty extreme. Yeah. It really sums up the attitude there, like there's no other option but success. And that kind of thinking, sure, it can lead to some amazing breakthroughs, but it also makes you think about the toll it takes on people. Is this ethical to push people that hard?
That's the question, isn't it? The burnout rate must be crazy. But how does he even get people to buy into this? I mean, yeah, they're working on cool technology and these are world-changing missions, but how much can one person sacrifice?
It's his superpower, almost. Musk is incredibly good at getting people to believe in his vision. It's like we all want to feel like we're part of something bigger, to feel like we're making a difference. And for a lot of people, the chance to work with him, to push the limits of what's possible, that's worth the cost.
So let's say I'm a young engineer, just graduated from MIT, and I get a job offer from Tesla. Paint me a picture. What am I getting myself into?
Well, first of all, buckle up. You're going to be working on super tight deadlines, constant pressure to innovate, and Musk is very hands-on, so expect a lot of direct feedback.
And probably not the most sugar-coated feedback either.
Probably not. Be prepared for long hours, weekend work, not a lot of time to relax.
Lots of late nights and takeout, I imagine.
Yeah, probably. It's definitely a sink or swim environment. But it attracts a certain type of person. Someone who's super driven, loves a challenge, someone who can push themselves to the limit.
It sounds both exciting and exhausting. But here's the thing. It works. SpaceX has totally changed how we think about space travel. Tesla is leading the electric car revolution. Solar City made solar energy a mainstream thing.
It's hard to argue with those results. He's definitely a disruptor. He's achieved what people thought was impossible.
Right. But the question is, can it last? Can this model of intense innovation driven by this super demanding kind of crazy work culture, can it be sustained?
It's a big question. What happens when the pace slows down a bit? What happens when those goals aren't so easy to reach? And what happens when people finally burn out?
That's what I keep wondering about. Is this the future of how we work? Or is this just a unique moment in time?
I don't know the answer. But the Elon Musk story is a warning, in a way. It shows us what's possible when you have ambition and drive. But it also reminds us that there are costs, and we need to find a better way, a more sustainable way, to innovate and make progress.
It's been quite a journey exploring the world of Elon Musk, and I'm honestly walking away with more questions than answers. He's such a complicated person, a real mix of brilliance and flaws.
I agree. But he definitely makes us think. He challenges us to dream bigger, to question our assumptions, and to ask ourselves what role we want to play in shaping the future.